This podcast is brought to you by lineupmedia.fm.
Because if you can tell me what your habits are, I can tell you what sort of a person you are. I can tell you what your future looks like.
But like I always say, life is 10% what happens to you, it's 90% what you do about it.
The people who are most effective in the workplace believe that their future is going to be bigger than their past. When people don't believe that their future is going to be bigger than their past, they begin to disengage.
You're listening to The Circuit of Success, a podcast dedicated to helping you achieve success in every facet of life. Only on the lineupmedia.fm podcast network. Now, your host, Brett Gilliland.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I am your host, Brett Gilliland. Today, I've got Samantha Russell with me. Samantha, how you doing?
I'm doing really good. How are you?
I am great. It's good to be with you. I see your face all the time, it seems like, but it's through social media and all the stuff and all the value you're bringing to the investment advisors out there in the world, which we'll talk a little bit about, but we're going to talk about kind of the mindset and the success you've had over your career. And so we're excited to do that today. So you are the chief evangelist at FMG Suites in 20 over 10. You are a wife. You are a mother of two, soon to be, what people can't see on the screen here is soon to be 3.
Right.
Right?
Yes, we're very excited. Coming in just about 13 weeks, but who's counting?
13 weeks. Well, you're counting. That's who's counting, right?
Yes.
And so you're having a little boy. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we have a 6-year-old boy, 3.5-year-old daughter, and now this baby coming is a boy as well.
That is awesome. Well, that daughter of yours is going to be protected on both sides, right? From the little brother's friends, the big brother's friends, and so on. So, well, you also, we were talking before we recorded, our worlds growing up were a little differently. I'm an only child. You're the oldest of 6. So your house was really loud. My house was really quiet growing up. But you don't just wake up and become this entrepreneur. You've built a great business, which, we are going to be a part of. And so we're excited about that. But tell us a little bit more about Samantha. What made you the woman you are today? And how did you just wake up and become the successful entrepreneur?
Well, thank you for all the nice compliments, by the way. And I did grow up the oldest of 6 kids in Cleveland, Ohio. Very simple Midwestern upbringing. Everybody in our neighborhood was mostly Catholic. We all went to the same Catholic parochial school. Everybody was sort of in the same socioeconomic status. So there was no keeping up with the Joneses really in our neighborhood. It was a very working class neighborhood. And my mom sort of was the first entrepreneur I had to look up to because she, even though there were 6 of us, 6 and 9 years, so she was very busy. It was always important to her to contribute and to make money and to work hard beyond even just, raising a family. So my dad went off to work every day in his suit and tie, and she ran a daycare at our home. So up to 20 kids at a time. So It was always very crazy, but she took it in stride. And she was definitely the first entrepreneur that I saw. And it was really inspiring to me. It was never a question of not feeling fulfilled. She had her own thing. And as a woman, especially, I think having role models like that, where it's somebody who gets to do both, be the mom, because that was always important to me too, being able to be a mom, but also start your own business or have your own thing was really inspiring. So that was probably my first sort of look at it. And then honestly, I went off to college, Southern Ohio, Miami University. Most people know it from Ben Roethlisberger playing there.
Yeah.
And
I was thinking maybe Wally Zerbiak back in the day, I think,
there's a good amount of people from St. Louis that go to Miami.
Yeah.
Not so many people where I live now in Pennsylvania know it, but a lot of people from St. Louis. So when I went there, I studied communications, and I didn't really necessarily know what I wanted to do. I thought I would move to Chicago, some sort of big city, and work in PR. But my junior year of college, I met my now husband, who was just finishing up his graduate program at Penn State University in design. And we fell hard for each other. And when I graduated, I started applying for jobs in the area he was at and got a job at Penn State University working in alumni relations and development. So I would go on the road and travel all over the country and meet with alums and hear their stories and, talk with them about why they should give back to the university. And so I met with people, of every type of business and industry you can think of who had been successful and got to hear how they did it. And it was so cool. It was like having a podcast or something.
Yeah, your own private podcast.
Yeah, like an interview series. And then I would pair them with the right college or philanthropic endeavor. So I was sort of like the initial meet and greeter. And I loved that job. It was great for somebody just out of college, traveling all over the country on the university time and getting to see really cool stuff. Like I got to go to the 49ers stadium and be in the locker room, like right before they did a game. And like, really
that's cool.
Yeah. And so my husband is really, I get all the credit because I've been the face of the business, but he's really the entrepreneur. So he's the one who had the idea for 20 over 10.
Okay.
And he's the one who pulled me into the business. So it was really him that gave us the start.
Oh, that's awesome. So talk to us about that. So you're just sitting around, the campfire in Pennsylvania somewhere and saying, let's just start a company, or what was he doing before that?
No, so he had taken a tenured position at Penn State in their design program. So he was working there, and one of the people that he would sometimes work with on other like consulting projects, they were working on a complete like brand overhaul, website design refresh for a large independent producer group that's based in Pennsylvania. And when they were working on this project, they built this great brand and identity and website. But then when they go to link all the websites for the individual advisors that were part of this group, they all looked exactly the same, said the same thing, had the same picture of a gray-haired man in a red convertible going over the San Francisco, bridge, Golden Gate Bridge. So they started like asking questions. Why is this like this? They learned a little bit about compliance, that the options for advisors, this was like 2011 at the time, I would say, were really limited. And so they said they had been using Squarespace to build out some things for other clients. And they were like, why don't we build a Squarespace for financial services, and people can build their own websites. It'll be compliant. We'll hook up to, we'll archive everything. And, it's good. Ignorance is good when you're starting a company because you don't know all the things you don't know. So they thought all these advisors would come and build their own websites. And so that was sort of the initial idea, was they were going to just create the technology and then advertise it and let people come and create things themselves.
Got it. And then you learn very quickly that advisors aren't good at building their own websites.
Yes, we did. So the two of them still had their full-time jobs, and they did learn very quickly that wasn't going to be the case. So they still thought the idea was good. And a lot of the people they knew in finance said it was a good idea, but that they needed to sell it and they needed to offer in-house design services. So my husband convinced me to leave my job at Penn State and come on to do sales and marketing. We used to always joke, like, if I could sell people the idea of donating to the university, that I could sell someone anything, you're not
right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So at the time when we first started doing it, it's interesting. People always ask, like, how did you learn so much about marketing? It was really as I would learn, I would teach. And I think that's one of the best ways to get good at something. So I would just spend all day looking at what companies who are successful were doing, teach myself, do courses, online work, like scour the internet for articles, read crazy books, and then write it all down and turn it into my own blog post specific for financial services. And the 20 over 10 blog was born that way. We really wanted to practice what we were preaching. So we would share the mistakes we were making along the way. And so, I was employee number one, came on and did a ton of cold calling, ton of meeting with advisors, hearing the pain points they were having. We primarily were in the independent RIA model for the first 2 to 3 years because we didn't have a really comprehensive one-click submission process to attach to broker-dealers. So almost all of our clients were in the independent RIA space. And we had a lot of luck going to conferences like for NAPFA, ACP, the Garrett Network, where people have the choice and the freedom to choose whatever kind of marketing that they want. And that's where we started gaining a lot of traction then.
So talk about the mindset of an entrepreneur. So there's a ton of people listening to this podcast that are business owners, they're leaders of organizations or leaders of their homes. And so I think it's huge to talk about the mindset of that stuff, right? Because we talk now because you come out on the other end and it was successful. But talk to us about those days when it maybe wasn't successful and you and your husband working together and you're kind of like sitting there at night, like, oh, and maybe that's never happened. I don't know. But I also know entrepreneurial is this roller coaster that you go through. And it's a fun roller coaster, but it's a roller coaster, right? And some hills are bigger than others. And so talk to us about that, like the mindset that it took to know you were going to do at the end and do well, but the days that were really tough.
It's such a good question. And we were lucky that my husband had his job still at the university. So we weren't like
going to go bankrupt,
freaking out about income, but still we were, it was definitely, it was bootstrapped. So it was all our own money that we were spending. I think from a mindset perspective, I've always been like this. I know it's like a cliche thing to say, but I am just obsessed with reading and learning things. My mom used to make fun of me as a kid, the breakfast table. If I couldn't find anything to read, I'd read the back of the cereal box or like an advertisement.
Wow.
I love to read. And so I just always had this mindset. If we don't know the answer, it's just that we don't know it yet. We can figure it out. And it's funny. I try to teach that with my kid, the growth mindset of don't say I can't do this, say I can't do it yet.
Yeah.
And I truly do believe that. And even if it's not you that can do it, you can figure out who to hire to do it for you. So I really tried to have that positive mindset about it. And my husband and I have always been really great working together as business partners because he's very much more practical, tangible, like that's great. We think we can figure it out, but we need to figure it out in the next month before cash runs out. So we were a really great team in that he really focused on the business plan, the finances, registering the company, dealing with the lawyers and the attorneys and all that. And I really focused on getting the word out, guerrilla marketing, spreading the word. So the mindset that I had going into it was always just every win or like sale that we can get is not only going to give us momentum to get another one, because that momentum is super important, but also we're going to learn something that will make it easier to sell to the next person. So if I was on the phone with somebody and I was really, really working to convince them that they should give us a shot, as they were talking, like I would just take copious amounts of notes and at the end of the day, type them all up because I was learning so much about an industry that I had never worked in before. And then I would, Google was my friend. I would Google tons of things. Yeah. And sometimes the mindset too was going into a call. If it was, let's say it was with a broker dealer. So for those people listening who don't know the difference, but like if we couldn't really work with them yet, I would still take the call because I figured I could learn something about that industry that eventually would help us break into it. Yep. So I never, ever turned down any meetings that whole first 18 months. It was just, what can I learn from every person I talk to?
And so start to sell was when? How long did you guys own that and run that by yourselves?
You mean start selling it to the customers?
No, like the company, right? So, I mean, as you guys joined up with FMG Suites, I mean, from start to, I don't want to say finish because it's clearly not even close to finished.
Yeah.
But how long was that process?
It was just under 6 years.
So 6 years. And then you kind of get the FMG Suites, who's one of the largest, I think, in the country, right? Of doing what you're doing. How do you get their attention?
Yeah. So the first, the marketplace so with any industry, right? Like if you niche down specific enough, there's going to be less competition. So there's tons of marketing companies out there. There's MailChimp, there's HubSpot, there's Constant Contact, all these companies. Yeah. But specific for financial services, there's a lot less. So anytime somebody else comes on the scene, especially if it's a technology-backed product, it's not just a consultant, it's something that can be scaled, people pay attention. And so really from day one, we had VCs coming and, wanting to look at what we had built, what we were doing, who our team was. And we had, caught the attention of TD Ameritrade, Fidelity, and they all basically said from the beginning, like, you're too small. We can't offer this to our advisors. It's not scalable those first 2 years. But once we hit like a certain number of advisors using it and we had, 15 people on staff, then people started to take us more serious. Yeah. And so my husband and some of the C-suite team at FMG had seen each other at conferences and events and were always very cordial and would talk. So they were definitely aware of what we were doing. And I think kind of keeping tabs on us because they historically been in the BD space and wanted to really break into more of the RIA market. And so then the last 3 years, as we just sort of took off like a rocket ship, then it was really making sense for them to pay a lot more attention. So, you
do good work and you get the attention, right? It just happens organically, I think. I mean, that's the point to my question was, it's not like this grandiose thing where you got to put this plan together and go hunt somebody down to partner with. You do the right work for people that are listening, right? In whatever careers they're doing, you do the right work, things just happen.
Yeah. And I think going into whatever business you're building, trying to decide from the beginning whether you want to build the company to be, something you're doing when you're 80 and passing it on to your kids, and maybe it's a 100-year company, or do you want to build it to sell and then maybe sell something else? Like, are you more of the entrepreneur who likes the build part? Is important to think about so that you can build it to scale or build it to be attractive to buyers. And my husband and his partner always from the get-go, they love to build and create. And so they always had the mindset that they wanted to build it to a certain level and then sell it so that it could keep going. And like my husband didn't feel like he wanted to be the CEO of a 400 person company. So knowing that about yourself is really important too. And kind of like your overall trajectory and plan.
Yeah. What do you think, you and your husband, if you're sitting around, well, you can't have a glass of wine technically because you're pregnant right now, but let's say you were having a glass of wine tonight, a bottle of wine tonight. And what do you think you'd go back and tell yourselves maybe 5 years ago, 7 years ago about that journey of building a company? What advice would you have for yourselves?
Oh, it's such a good question. I think it's funny, like, so much of what I would tell, I feel like if we knew the information, would prevent us from wanting to get started. Because, certain industries are really difficult to break into. Financial services is one of them because of the SEC and FINRA and compliance and all of these rules that you have to follow. It's not like, hey, we're going to start doing marketing for photographers or marketing for bakery owners. Doing marketing in financial services, for those people listening who aren't aware, the government and regulators are trying to prevent another Bernie Madoff from guaranteeing 12% returns to everyone. And so there's a lot of parameters in place that make it more difficult to start a business in the marketing space in this industry. So not knowing a lot actually, I think, was a huge benefit to us, because I think if we would have known more, it would have been disheartening and we would have maybe quit before we even got started. I will say the one thing that was so crucial for our success was, like, every time we would get, when you own a business, you're always looking at the books and the numbers. And sometimes we'd be looking, being like, oh my gosh, if we don't do X, Y, or Z, like, we're going to run out of money in 6 months in the very beginning. And your natural inclination is to spend less and to buckle down but you have to fight against that, because you have to spend money to make money. So you have to hire more people so that you can take on more accounts. You have to run ads and spend money on marketing so you can get more attention. And that was something that was difficult for both of us, because we're both pretty risk averse people in general.
Okay. That's interesting.
So that was hard to fight against.
Yeah. Well, I wrote down paralysis by analysis. I mean, I think so many people, we want to overanalyze everything and have all the answers and have it perfectly on this spreadsheet and have this one page on this business plan. And sometimes you have to build it while you're going. And that's what I'm hearing that you all did, is kind of that. And it's never luck. So I don't mean that in a negative way, but just kind of like you didn't know what you didn't know, but you had a mission and you had a passion for building something. And so you did it anyway. And I think fear can hold so many of us back.
Yeah,
right?
I 100% agree. I think, like, just making a decision, that is the most important thing. If you just look at, what some of the most successful businesses and entrepreneurs have in common, is that they just kept going. That whole Angela Duckworth grit book is so true. The grittiness is so important, like, because you're going to have days that just feel like everything falls apart and you just, you get so many no's and so many doors slammed in your face, but not giving up and just keep showing up. And there were so many times where I would, approach people and they wouldn't give me the time of day. And then 2-3 years later, they were knocking on my door, like begging us to do business with them because we were the hot new company on the market for their advisors. And so that was a really satisfying feeling to say, okay, we've built a brand and a reputation. It takes time to build a reputation that can be trusted. And I don't blame companies for saying to two young people in their 20s, hey, you've only been around a year. Right. Why should we switch everything and come over to you? That is a risk for their business as well.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, you got to build scale, but that scale, sometimes it's like the young person coming out of college and they want to get the job and they're like, well, you can't get the job because you need experience. Well, then it's like, how in the hell do I get experience if you're not going to hire me? Right. And so it's the same thing though, whether I remember when we were starting Visionary Wealth Advisors, here we are, this company, and we left a big company and now we're this small Visionary Wealth Advisors that we created the brand and we were creating the website. And it's kind of like, but we had passion and we had energy and you have trust and respect and integrity and you focus on your community and all those things. I think that's what matters. And your passion, I say that your meaning collectively, your passion sells your brand.
And that's why now more than ever, though, having things like a podcast or putting an executive or a prominent person from your business on camera every week is so important, because as you're building your brand and you're trying to get your name out there more, there's something called the mere exposure effect in psychology, which tells us that just by merely being exposed to something, the more often we're exposed to it, the more we will rate that we like it and feel like we know it. And so when you said at the beginning, like, I feel like I see your face all the time, that was an intentional part, for me, is I said, maybe if I start doing these videos and showing up in people's social media feeds every week, they'll start to they'll listen to a quick 2-minute tip I'm giving about marketing, and they're not ready yet to invite me, to come to their custodian and give a webinar to all thousands of their advisors. But if they hear me give a quick 2-minute clip, they're going to start to see that I know what I'm talking about. I have knowledge, I have expertise, I have authority. And over time, that mere exposure effect kicks in. And that really, really is one of my best tips for anyone starting a business is get in front of the camera or on a podcast so people can see your face, hear your voice week after week. And it will do wonders for building up that credibility and expertise so much faster.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's, I'm on this microphone now for 4.5 years or whatever. And at first when I started, it was one of those like, maybe I'll do one once a month or every other week. And then I did one, and then somebody was like, hey, where's the next one? And I'm like, okay. And then, so we started doing them every week. And you're right. I mean, I'd never heard of this mere exposure effect, but I tell people all the time, it's not comfortable though, right? It's not comfortable to get on that camera. It's not comfortable to be vulnerable and put it out in the world, out on social media, and say these things, because you don't want to come across as like you think you know everything, because I don't, right? But you got to put it out there. And I tell business owners all the time, turn on the camera, let it rip. Put it out there, see what happens, right? So when you hear that, when you think of audio versus video versus print, that's the way I see it. I can read it, I can hear it, or I can watch it. What are you finding has been the most value for people through either social media or finding new clients? And not just for financial, it could be lawyers, doctors, whoever. What are they using? Print, audio, or video?
So I think across the board, video is number one, because it can lend itself to really short snippets. And so you might not even, in order to stop and listen to a podcast, you typically have to be either super interested in the subject or the person being interviewed to hit play and commit. Like most podcasts, 20, 30 minutes long. Whereas a video, if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, and the way the algorithms work, the social media platform is going to show you content, not just by people you follow, but by people who you're connected to, that they follow and they're connected to. So you might see in your feed a Facebook video without even following a company, and you might watch it just even for 30 seconds. And now you're exposed to that company that you weren't before. Whereas you can't have that same sort of initial exposure with other mediums. So video has definitely worked the most, and consumers are watching more video than ever before. I mean, I always joke, my husband's grandmother, she's in her 80s and she's on YouTube all the time searching how to do things, how to
I love it.
reconnect to the internet, how to, vote by mail, whatever the case may be. And I think that just this past year, Pew Research, they put out a study every year about social media usage in the United States and in the world. YouTube took over Facebook as the number one most used platform across all age groups.
Wow.
So it doesn't matter if you're 90 or 9, people are on YouTube a lot. And so it's a great place to be found organically too by a whole new audience, because someone could go to Google and search something, whatever the case, the query might be. I'm going to give another financial example. Might be the audience love that as much, but the best restaurants in St. Louis, and one of the things that could come up in the Google search results could be a quick video of your company talking about the best restaurants in St. Louis. So Google will show those YouTube search results right on the first page of Google. Yeah. And so that is why I'm really bullish on video. You can also create video though, like this, like you and I are talking, and turn it into a podcast and then repurpose your content. So that's also a great strategy as well.
Yeah. And I saw too that it was something like 83% of videos are watched on mute.
Yes. So you definitely want to put the captions on.
I mean, that's crazy to me, right? But it's true, because how many times are we laying in bed when we should be falling asleep and you're scrolling through and it's like, all right, you don't want to be rude to your spouse and, listen to something they could care less about, or they're watching TV or whatever, or reading. And it's like, I just watch the captions. And so I think that's a really big point that I hope people that do create some videos that they understand is 83% of videos are watched on mute.
Yeah. And keeping them really short, having a variety of videos. So like when I'm creating videos for social media, I try to keep them 2 to 4 minutes. For YouTube, I try to have some that are 15 minutes to even an hour, more like in depth, because, on YouTube, the algorithm, it's weighting both how many views you get, but then what total percentage of the video people are watching. So you're going to get a higher percentage of people watching the whole video when it's only 2 minutes long, but they're not spending as much time on your channel, which is also part of the algorithm. So having a wide variety of links. So you might have a quick 2-minute video talking about something, but then interview an expert on something for 30 minutes. And, I'm sure as you've seen, when you create an interview series, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, and you bring in other people who have expertise, who are well-known in that space, then they're going to share it with their audience. So then you're now getting exposed to their audience. So it's just a great way to get in front of new potential prospects.
This is a spider web and just becomes massive. So let's talk about fears. I mentioned it earlier. I think fears hold so many of us back. And I ask this question all the time, but how many of the fears you've put in your mind, right? So Samantha Russell had this fear when you're building 20/10. How many of those fears actually blew up to the magnitude you laid in bed and thought about them?
I will just give the caveat that I'm not a worrier really at all. My husband he worries enough for both of us. He will.
All right, perfect. So how many of his fears blew up to the magnitude, right?
So he would be the one in bed at night being like, oh my God. I am just by nature not a worrier, which thank God for my genes.
No kidding.
People struggle with that. But I did have some, like I worried that it might, tear our marriage apart working together. Didn't happen. He was always worried, we were going to run out of money, or that we just wouldn't get enough traction quick enough and we'd have to close it up. None of the fears that he had came true. Absolutely none. And I would say, if anything, like the stuff that he was worried about, were never the things that we needed to be worried about. We were really lucky, knock on wood. We didn't have any like big disasters that happened that we had to deal with. I know some companies have lawsuits that they have to contend with, or they've mortgaged their house to pay for the business. And then the business, we didn't have any of those terrible things happen. So we were really lucky.
That's awesome. But I think it's, you would probably agree though, that these fears that hold us back, I shouldn't say always, but rarely ever do they come true. Like your husband sitting there running out of money, right? That's a real fear for people. And working in money every day, I hear that from people, right? I don't want to start this, or I don't want to do that. What if I go broke? And it's like, I mean, it could happen.
Say to him, like, we're two highly educated, skilled people. We can always make more money.
That's right.
make more money. And
That's
maybe we have to spend less, but we can always make more. My mom used to always say this when I was a kid, and she learned it from her mom, but they would always say, whenever there was a problem or something that was just causing you to think about it over and over again, they would say, just picture yourself at 90 and you're sitting there. Are you going to be thinking about this? Will this ever even cross your mind? And if the answer is no, just let it go. And so I use that as my barometer all the time. And there's not very many things that once you've lived your life and, you know, you're approaching the end of life that really matter. I mean, other than, did you spend time with the people you love? Did you work on something you were passionate about? And so I really try to use that day in and day out.
Want to make a difference in the world, right? So how do you stay a student of the game?
I am obsessed with reading everything I can get my hands on across all different disciplines. I'm a huge fan of behavioral psychology. I think it doesn't matter what industry you're in, but if you're trying to grow a business, especially learning how people make decisions about buying, how they make decisions about what communications and messages they pay attention to, like what gets their attention is really important. So
what do you recommend on that? What any books you recommend or any spots to go to?
I read a lot of different like online publications. So I'll read like the Harvard Business Review. I love to read The Economist. There's different just like behavioral psychology blogs out there. Daniel Crosby in our industry and Morgan Housel are two names that come to mind. They do a lot on behavioral psychology, specifically in financial services. Adam Grant does a lot on behavioral psychology for workplaces and communications. He just came out with a great book called Think Again. Yeah. James Clear, who does Atomic Habits, talks a lot about, you know, different things. And yeah, so there's lots of great authors out there. One of my favorite books, though, I say this all the time, which is really funny. It's not a business book by any stretch of the means, but whenever people ask me like, what's a top book you can recommend for being a better communicator, is it's not a book that most people would equate to communicating with other people in general, but the principles in it are so well laid out and they apply to any relationship, whether it's your significant other, your children, your staff, and it's how to talk so kids will listen and listen so kids will talk. So if you've never read that book, they give you so many different frameworks. Like if somebody comes to you with a problem, how do you respond? And so much of what we've been conditioned to do is to solve problems, which leads people to stop talking. And
how to listen so kids will talk?
How to talk so kids will listen and listen so kids will talk. And so in the book, they give you, what I love about it is there's lots of little like cartoons with bubbles of like parents talking to their kids, and they show you different strategies, but it doesn't just apply to children. It applies to any relationship you can think of, which is just being a better listener and then asking the right kinds of questions to make people open up, to make them feel like whatever it is you're talking to them about is their idea, which is also an important part of buy-in. So that's one of my, it doesn't matter what business you're in. I think it's a great, great book to read.
I will be putting that on the list right now. I'll be ordering that when we get off the phone here or get off the Zoom call, whatever we're on these days with this pandemic world. So, so what do you do right now to stay in the game? I talked about being a student of the game, but to be a student in the game. And what I mean by that is mindset. Is it meditation? Is it nutrition? Is it sleep, water, food, all the above? What is it for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's all of the above. I mean, you can see me here drinking my 40 ounces of water. I have all day long, have that. I make it a point to walk 4 miles a day. And then I do circuit training. My workouts are very different now that I'm this far along. My
6 or 7 months pregnant, that starts to happen, right?
The one habit I'm really bad about is sleep. In order to be present with my kids when they're home and still get as much done as I need to, I often work late, which is not a good habit. But I feel like, there'll be time to catch up on sleep later when they're in school, like more hours. And one of the things that I think is just really important for me is I try to make it a regular habit every week, once a week, to do a call with somebody that either I've met on Twitter or came across their work and I'm inspired by them, or maybe a client of ours that, used us 5 years ago and they had great success and I just want to check in with them, or somebody in our industry that I look up to. So try to do one in-person call, whether it's a Zoom call or just like a phone call, but where I can actually talk to people every week. And that really helps fill my bucket, gets me hearing what's working, kind of on the ground. And also just keeps that network growing, which is also really important.
It's awesome. I love it. So where do our listeners find more of Samantha Russell?
Yeah. So if you go to samantharussell.20over10.com, all of my social media handles, all the videos that we create, all the resources, marketing resources that we have, free and available for anyone to download are all there. And again, we're specific to financial services, but if you're in any what I call service-based industry where you're not necessarily selling a product as much as you're selling a service, these apply. You'll just see
you're absolutely right.
Financial based.
Just change the financial advisor word to whatever you do word, and they all apply.
Yeah.
It'll work. Well, Samantha, it's awesome having you on the Circuit of Success. Keep up the great work. Love what you guys are doing. And to your point, to validate this, I mean, we're here today because you're picking up the phone, you're giving a video, and you're making things happen, and you're making a difference, which is why we get to talk. And now you get to make a difference to our listeners. So we're very thankful for that, and look forward to seeing you again in the future on the Circuit of Success.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Tune in next week for another episode of The Circuit of Success with Brett Gilliland on the lineupmedia.fm podcast network. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and through our website, circuitofsuccess.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and email any questions to info@circuitofsuccess.com.
This podcast was a presentation of lineupmedia.fm.